Tonight I would like to talk about Zend Framework package, Zend Form. It is part of Zend Framework 2 or 3 as a project. It may be used as a standalone. So I worked with Zend Forms for about 4 years. Zend Framework 2 and Zend Framework 3 Zend Forms is actually the same library, so it's forward compatible. By definition, that's the definition. Zend Form is intended primarily as a bridge between your domain models and a view layer. Zend Framework manages a form as a domain, as an entity, or entities. It may validate and filter the input. It also may take care about displaying the form with its own Zend view helper. Currently the project is on. There is 250 contributors. Currently we are on version 2.11. It's still going on. There is 48 open issues. Not all of them are really an issues. It's just people could search through the documentation. And documentation is really good. Also, the community has on Slack channel, which is Zend Framework, and discourse forums. It's possible to get answers straight away. There is around 600 people on Zend Framework Slack. So Zend Form I see it as a bundle package of everything what we may need to manage the form. There are recognized form elements, which are kind of models for the form elements. They're like number, like range, date. Also, those are supported by form elements, view helpers. View helper, in that the framework really takes care about the generation of the HTML tags for us. We just may use that in a form as a plugin. Zend Form is dependent from Zend validators and filters. So they are built in quite 32 validators, bit of filters, and 4 hydrators. It's worth to use Zend hydrators. It will be on the other slides, a bit more detailed about that. So it is possible to create a form just from a class. The form needs to extend Zend form object really. It is possible to pass an array, maybe from JSON or just PHP array, to a form factory, and if it's in the correct format, it actually populates the form for us. There will be more examples later. It's quite exciting actually. It's dependent from Zend input filter, which is validator and input, actually input filter. Okay, this is dependencies. So if we type composer requires Zend form, actually it also installs those packages, and those as extras. It helps to manage the form managers for us. PHP will ask for PHP International extension and MB-string for filters and validators. So the form, as I mentioned earlier, form extends from form. It manages for us form elements, but also it may manage for us filters and validators. So we have everything in one, like elements, filters, validators. We may attach entities and hydrators to that form objects. It actually takes care for everything, about everything. I mentioned about two form element managers, actually two form managers. This is what I usually have in my config for application. So those elements are available from the service locator. This is example how we create form. So it's possible to set attributes in a constructor, and the whole form is created in a constructor. We also may add some elements into that in a constructor as well. So it's called factory-backed form. So if we, that's how it is created. Just start the object, and it's possible to manipulate, make form more dynamic. I mean, populate with data, create elements on the go. So form consists of elements. There is a namespace for it, of course. The elements, it has a big number of predefined attributes. I mean, when we pass the element array specification to the form factory, there are predefined attributes which we can use. Attributes which are not on the list, not whitelisted really, are not filtered through, but it's possible to create own attributes as long as it starts with data. So form element contains data about the label. It is possible to translate it on the go with the Zend view helper. We may add attributes, and we may have options for the label as well. We may create own validators as long as it extends Zend validator. I think it's just one or two functions really, which needs to be written. And it's possible to use the full class name or predefine with Zend Form element manager our own names for the helpers. There should be a bit more about it later. So in the form, everything consists really of element. We have element, field set, and collection. Element is set of extends actually element, and it's set of elements, where collection is set of field sets which actually extends elements, and collection is also an element because so everything is an element. Can't be simpler. This is an example of form field set declaration. So if we pass that data to Zend Form factory, if we pass that array to that class, we may be able to receive form like that. I mean, particularly here, we have a field set with elements in it. I mentioned about attributes and options given for the element. So there are global and element specific attributes. Like for the range, for example, we would use min and max and inclusive. So there is plenty, over 50. Actually, there is a huge list of attributes which we may use. From some, about some I had no idea they actually exist, like on drag start. So it's possible to pass some data to an element from the server through the data attribute. Those are few examples just of elements which are available. This is an example of Zend element text which may be added to the Zend Form object. Also, it has a priority, so it's possible to control from the element itself the order in which it will be displayed through the Zend Form helper. This is how the select element looks like. We can predefine the values. We may set in-array validator, which may prevent us from accepting new values as a select, because sometimes it's possible that something is not on the list and we allow people to create new items through the text. There are also checkbox and radio elements. So Zend helper, it may create those elements for us, well, I would say for free, automatically. So I mentioned about form field set, which is set of collection of Zend Form elements. All field sets should extend from the same class, which is Zend field set. It is possible to attach the entities through the set object method. Also, it may Zend Form field set it's possible to pre-declare the hydrators which will be used automatically. This is the example of a class. Most of collection field sets looks like that. So it's possible to set a hydrator with custom parameters. It's possible to attach the hydrator. It gives us full control on a form. So form collection exists of form field sets, which is set of collection of elements. There is separate helper for form collection in Zend helper. It generates field set tags for us with attributes which we set. Here is an example. So it is possible. It's during the validation. Actually, the Zend collection it may prevent us from removing the elements of the field sets. So if we display the form collection with two field sets, it may allow us to add new elements, but not to remove. If we remove anything, it will cause us validation errors. So it's also so if we have collection with no elements generated but something pre-declared, the Zend view helper it creates a data template attribute, which are going to be difficult, which contains past HTML of how the field set would look like if it's rendered as a view. So we receive collection with no field sets, but something pre-declared, but no field sets displayed, but something pre-declared. So with some smart JavaScript, and not really smart, it's actually 7 lines, it's in a manual, it's possible to rewrite placeholder, like give iteration number, for example, with regex, and append that to the parent field set. It's possible to remove and add elements this way. The code is JavaScript is not very long. This particular one even contains a button remove attribute. There are 3 approaches to create forms. One is factory-backed one, where we just declare the class. We could see it on the previous slideshows. we may pass the array or from JSON into array into a form factory into a constructor. So actually the form factory figures out how the form should look like just from a properly formatted array. And it's possible to create forms with annotations, those things with comments. It's fully functional. So we've seen factory-backed form. That's how it normally looks like. We take care about input filter, hydrator, and entity object. This is how in Zend Form we add to factory-backed forms an element. This is by default it is a text element, so I did not need to declare type here. Those things are rendered like attributes, class, placeholder. Class and placeholder are whitelisted in a Zend form. Also, in a form, we may declare how the validation and filtering would look like. So we have one form where in constructor we create our form with elements and collections and field sets, and there is another method where we declare how it should be handled during the validation. So this may be just a config in an application. That config may be read from by some service and passed into form factory. This is an example of just an array with field sets and which has elements, so we may pass really long array. I've seen array like longer than 1,000 lines, nicely formatted. So I mentioned earlier that form factory and form uses two managers, one for element adding, removing, and another one for validating, providing filters and validators. This is an example of form annotation. So from file which may look like that, for the annotation builder, it also may figure out. I mean, that form has been declared form user. I think annotation builder, yeah, it should pass the into constructor. That's in string. This is how we handle forms in controller or in actions. We load that form, we load the entity, we bind the entity into form. If in case of post request, we attach posted data into form, so but validation does not happen yet. The validation happens when we check if form is valid. So it reads the declaration for input filter, like input filter or validator. And with get data, can you see that one? No. Sorry? It's just a model, really. It holds protected properties. If it's something like class hydrator, it may have setters and getters. It's just, it holds the data. I mentioned the form view is part of Zend Form package. It may render for us message errors, inputs, labels, rows, which is label and input and messages. This is an example in a template. If we pass to the template form, it's actually with the function form render that generates the whole form by default with default markup. We may also display individual elements, individual collections. We may change them on the fly in template as well if necessary, or rather not. The input filter. Input filter, I mentioned about filters and validators. So every element has its own input filter, which consists of filter and elements. There will be an example of filter, so you will see more what I mean by that. This is okay, maybe now. It is possible to attach many validators to one element through the validator chain. We may set priorities for those validators as well. So here is an example of just standalone input filter package used. It's that simple. Yeah, so I mentioned there is many filters built in. It's also very easy to build own filters. It's actually just one method filter with which we return our transformed data. Maybe filters may be attached to the form, maybe attached to the collections, to the elements, maybe reused. Oh, that's a good thing. That's some examples of filters. So it takes the user input, it do whatever we want, and it's actually when we receive from form those elements, the data is transformed already. It may be lowercase, it may be underscores. We may actually even do a callback with a class. There is a valid filter which makes callback for us. So if when some field is submitted, it's actually called a class with and the value of the field is an argument. So we can do like internal calls. It's by default attached to Zend filter. Here is an example of array. In case if we create factory backed forms, we would pass it to at element or at field. Sorry, could be an element. We would pass it to input specification method. So I mentioned it's possible to change the validators, set the priorities as well. That's a separate package, Zend validator. This is an example how the specification for validator looks like. So again, it may be passed as an array or pragmatically or through annotation. So hydrators, it helps to retrieve the data from posted data from an entity, because I mentioned earlier that we attach the posted data to a form. So when we retrieve that data, it may be changed on the fly for us. I use mostly object property hydrators, so I create getters, setters, and this way the Zend Form knows which properties are available. This is an example of custom hydrator. So in this one, if the input code name, for example, is not provided, if it's empty, it actually generates UUID, like random string, and that's it. That's only one method, and it rewrites the hyphens to underscores. This is how we may create custom hydrators, attach custom hydrators in a factory backed form. So to create the form, we just need to start it. It may have internally declared input filters. through filter specification method. So we set the data with post, we check if it's valid, and we get from form through get data, the data filtered and validated. Okay, not too bad. So that was about the form. Was it more or less clear? Yeah. So Zend Form may be easily used in the same way, really used with Zend Expressive. It's compatible because it's like standalone packages. I figured out the way about 2 years ago, I think, how to handle the forms automatically with middleware software. So I figured out that's actually the only thing which changes on pages, on different pages, is the root name. There may be many root names, many pages with the root name home, for example. So the name of the root, like home or news or videos, it's actually the core of the page. So I figure out that it's possible in configs to attach the root to the forms to the root name. So this way I wouldn't have to care about the URL, because I would always have the form loaded and ready to use in controller action or in the form view. So this is how my declaration of the forms. So form create display, that's the name of the root, which is known by the router. In Expressive we may use 3 different routers. More or less the configuration of those looks similar. Anyway, here I attached the form to the root and I gave it the name form create. So through the delegators, I don't need to worry in controller to set or read the correct form, because it's there with the form create, the get form create. Here is an example of the delegator. How I do attach, I just read the config, look for the root name index, and just add it to the controller. There is more resources. Zend community has grown since Zend Framework 1. They're really helpful on Slack. There is really good book, online book from Oleg Krivtsov. From Oleg Krivtsov online. It's actually full of good examples and some text, but good examples. And I did create some form generator, which is available on my GitHub. It actually renders the form. It's supposed to be formed to generate forms. Okay, that will be it. And that's the list of attributes which are available, and it's all predefined. I think Zend, personally I really like Zend Form, because I think they thought about everything. It's possible to manage the labels, the attributes, the options. There are many options for the attribute or for the elements which I had no clue about. Actually, I keep learning from it. It's really easy to use it. Also, what is quite difficult with Zend Form is to have multi-steps forms. Need to use session and some fancy set of steps. It's more difficult to use multi-step forms. It's much easier with JavaScript to hide and display the fields or field sets. Okay, thank you.
Does Zend Form help you somehow with file uploads and file inputs?
It handles for us file inputs. It may compress through the filters. We are able to compress those files as well with the path predefined. There is many. There is also upload component available. Upload a component to generate upload progress. I think yeah, it's available since Zend 2.
Does Zend Forms do any client-side validation when it renders the elements? Does it set any
What validation, sorry?
client-side?
Client-side validation? No, it's JavaScript thingy. No, not really. Only server-side.
Is the validation, does it handle when you can have multiple array grouped inputs? So if you use the square brackets in the name of the text input field, for example, you can have that text input can be duplicated multiple times.
If we pass an array as a string, there is a filter for it, which I think it's called explode. So I can imagine through combination of explode filter and in array validator, that could work. It's possible to, sorting is setting the priority is also important when we set those validators.
What if you don't know whether the user is going to submit 13 versions of something or one version? I mean, in text. Have you ever used the square brackets in the name?
You're talking about like multiple checkboxes and stuff like that, so options and...
There is element multi-checkbox. It's treated the same as the select. It has predefined amount of options available, but it is possible to do not use in array validator. I'm not sure if I understand correctly.
Yeah, that's right. It's tricky to understand. I think array.
Well, in name, do you mean name attribute maybe? Because there are squarey brackets.
No, it's does anybody know the proper name of the thing I'm trying to describe?
I know what it is, I don't know the name.
Yeah.
It's
more about the collections and the template. We were saying that you don't use the template to render multiple fields and have placeholders that can group those. So within the square brackets, you delete from those and delete them.
So maybe.
If we are in a field set or in a form in a field set and we have element in a field set, that element will have the field set name, and then in square brackets we also hold its own name. So it's actually it's possible to translate those form into array. Also, Zend element has quite nice function get input specification. It actually translates the object to an array. And it is possible to create form with a form. I have form to make forms with all field sets, all options. But yesterday my server was taken down, so I just had no time to buffer. Okay.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.